Welcome to the Kidlit Craft Podcast. I'm Anne-Marie Stroman, and I'm a writer, teacher, and book coach. Yet again, I'm here without my co-host, Erin Nuttall. We'll both be here with Season 3 of our regular series soon. This season, we're taking apart Erin and Trada Kelly's The First State of Being. For now, I'm bringing you some in-between episodes on topics around writing, and today I'm lucky to be joined by Denise Santomauro to talk about developmental edits, why you might want one, when it's the right time to get one if you do want one, and how the process works, from finding an editor to what to do with your edit letter. Denise Santomauro is a writer, editor, author coach, and teaching artist. She has worked with writers across genres and styles of writing, everything from secret society mysteries to coming-of-age young adult romance to heart-wrenching short stories and personal essays. As a writer herself, she writes essays, plays and scenes for young people, and middle grade and young adult novels. She holds an MFA in writing from Vermont College of Fine Arts. Hi, Denise. Welcome. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey into freelance editing. What brought you into this field?
So actually I was getting an edit from a freelancer myself. My graduating class from BCFA, one of my classmates, Kate Angelella, she had been an editor. I think she was with Simon & Schuster for several years and then went freelance. And I knew I wasn't going to get my manuscript that I had been working on done if I did not have a deadline. And if I put money towards something, I will do it. So I hired her and she gave me an amazing edit. And that was the manuscript I actually landed my agent with. So it was really a very helpful edit to get. And then about 6 months later, she was just so busy. She was bringing people on. And I came to her and said, hey, I think I can do this. I don't know what I'm doing yet, though. So can I be your assistant? And she was like, girl, shut up. You're coming on. If you want to do this, I want you to do it. You're going to be great. And so she brought me onto her team and I've been doing it ever since. And that was, probably late 2017 or early 2018, I think. So I've been doing this now for about 8 years.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And in that story, you're a writer too. So how does being a writer inform the work that you do as an editor?
Oh, wow. So much. I get to just work with a lot of people telling a lot of different kinds of stories, both in my editing work, but then also in my coaching work as an author coach and then as a writing teacher as well. And, I'm the kind of person who, one of the reasons I love writing is you can be a student forever. There's always something new to learn. I am constantly thinking about how we tell stories and the variety of different ways we tell stories and the variety of different things you can put in your toolbox to tell stories. But I also think it motivates me to keep writing. Honestly, I have found that when I am not actively pursuing my writing, I am not as good as an editor and as a coach, partly because if I can't figure out how to do it for myself, how can I help anybody else? So if I'm ever getting a little too busy with work, I have to make sure I'm prioritizing my writing because I'm not as good at those jobs if I'm not actually doing it myself, I've found. Some people can be. Some people are amazing. They're like, nope, this is just what I do. I don't want to write it. I just want to help you shape it. But not me. I've realized I have to be writing in order to do this work.
Yeah, I've always found that symbiotic relationship. When I'm teaching writing, my writing gets better. And
Yes.
what I do as a writer informs how I talk to my students about writing or coaching clients too. I remember taking an editing course. I have a certificate in professional editing and learning about giving comments and how to do that effectively. And I had not been writing a lot actually at the time that I took that class. And I was having to learn from someone else telling me. And then when I started doing my own writing, I was like, oh, the way that you make comments matters so much.
It really does.
So let's start at the beginning of the process. Say I'm writing a novel. When should I think about working with a freelance editor?
Yeah. So here's what I would say is that freelance editing is different than traditional editing and from a publishing house in the sense that the money exchange is very different, right? So technically you never have to hire a freelance editor. That's not something you ever have to do. And I do free consultations with people because I'm I know that this is a big chunk of money for some people to be able to put down. And I want you to be able to make that choice as informed as possible going into it. So what I would say is that everybody needs an edit at some point. Everybody needs to have other eyes on their work at some point. Whether or not you need a freelance editor is a very personal decision, and it's based on a lot of different things. So I'll start with that. Now, let's say you're like, yes, I need a freelance editor. I think it depends on the kind of edit that you want to get. If you're looking for, I've written this book and I need somebody to read the whole thing and tell me some information, I would say do another round before you bring it to somebody, just because you want to get your money's worth. And if you've written a first draft and you haven't even read through it yourself, and then you start contacting editors, there could be things that you can change and you can do prior to giving it to an editor that saves you some money and gets that editor focused on other things. So I would say if you reach a point where you're like, I need other eyes on this. I either don't have anybody in my life who I can give it to, or it's like a big haul to ask somebody to read an entire manuscript. I have the money to do it. Then, that's a good place to reach out. There are other kinds of edits though down the line, like copy edits and line edits, that you definitely want the manuscript to be like the story is set. You're not changing the story. These characters are fully baked. Like what you need help with is, should I combine these paragraphs? How do I sharpen my language? Or for line editing or for copy editing, need somebody to make sure that I'm like consistently using an Oxford comma or that my like grammar is correct. I think it just depends on where you are in the process and what kind of edit you're looking for. But like line edits and copy edits, those are down the line edits. I wouldn't spend your time, even as yourself, worrying too much about that kind of thing when you're still working on trying to figure out, what is the arc of this story? What do these characters want? What are they doing? Is this fully realized? Because all of those wonderful edits that you do, if you can do that kind of stuff yourself, might just all go in the trash or maybe not in the trash, but in the save for later, maybe I'll find a place for it. Folder. It's all going to go there potentially. So why do all that work now? Why not save it until later on?
Yeah. Okay. So you've mentioned a lot of different kinds of editing, and I just want to do a rundown for our listeners so that they know exactly what we're talking about. So let's actually kind of work our way backwards. So copy editing.
Yes. So copy editing is going to be things like somebody is going through your manuscript and making sure that your punctuation is consistent, your grammar usage is consistent. You will often, depending on if you're writing a novel, depending on the kind of language you might be using, you might give them a style guide of different words that are spelled in a specific way or things that are meant to be used in a specific way that they can keep an eye out for. Copy editors will also often have a preferred style guide that's a little more universal that they use, like the Chicago Manual of Style or MLA. And so they'll just make sure that everything is consistent to that. I want to encourage people, if you're looking to get a copy edit, to make sure that you are communicating that style guide piece to your copy editor, because we don't talk in complete sentences, and some people's language usage is very colloquial to the place that they grew up, and they put that into their story, and you want to preserve that. So making sure you put it together a style guide for your copy editor. So that's probably this. Yeah, that's probably, I would say like after that, you probably have a proofread. If you're with a publisher, you have what's called pass pages, which is just one final look and make sure everything looks the way you want it to look. So those are sort of end of the road kind of edits.
Yeah. And so for someone who's self-publishing, this would be a very late stage process. For someone who's going to go out to agents, you maybe don't need it unless you really struggle with grammar stuff. I know some fantastic writers who have trouble with the grammar piece, and so it becomes less readable. And so if that's a thing that you struggle with, have someone help you.
Absolutely. There's tons of great copy editors out there. I am not a copy editor myself. I have a lot of admiration for copy editors. That's my personal
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I cannot do it. Call it Maria, not me.
I don't do it anymore because I don't have time, but I do love it. Okay, so then line edits are a step before copy edits. What are line edits?
Line edits are going to be more artistic choices. Line edits would be like you've used several metaphors in this paragraph and they're not aligning right, and it's overwhelming, and now they're losing meaning. Personally, I think this is the strongest one, but I would also maybe write a note and say, hey, I cut these metaphors, these other two, because this one was really strong. and these two kind of didn't align with this other idea from the paragraph before that you were using. I just line edited a manuscript for someone who's self-publishing, and he really loved like the poetic device of putting like a single sentence paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
But he loved it a little too much. And so I helped him find ways to bring it together so that when he did do it, it had a lot more impact and meaning. So a lot of line editing is finding somebody who artistically sees your work in the same way you do, to strengthen individual lines, to strengthen paragraphs, to just get your meaning across in a more cohesive way or direct way, or sharpening passive language that you might have in your manuscript. Or if you have a lot of, I see this, she saw that, she saw this, she heard that, sharpening sort of verb usage. So line edits are, I would say, copy edits can be a little bit more like you follow a guide and this is what it is. Whereas line edits, like, the way I interpret a line might be different than the way another editor might be interpreting a line. And you as the writer might be like, I don't like either of those options. I like what I did here. It's that one's getting into a little bit more of the artistry of language in your manuscript.
Yeah. So really language focused and sharpening the reading experience for the readers as they go. So you mentioned you've done this for someone who's self-publishing. So this is the step in editing before the copy edit and before the proofread that you might get help with if you're self-publishing. If you're going to an agent, is this something that you might do as well?
It might be. It depends on the person, right? I think that it will, if you get a good line editor, it's going to strengthen your manuscript going out for sure. Any edit you do with a good editor is going to strengthen your manuscript going out. It just comes down to like where your priorities are and where you want to spend your money. Mm-hmm. So it can be, but it is another one where that could be something you do with an editor at a publishing house down the line too, right?
Okay. So then developmental edit, if I'm not missing one in between.
Not according to how I do edits, at least.
Okay. Yeah. When I studied editing, we talked about developmental edits in kind of a light, a medium, and a heavy edit. When we talked about it, it was like light was like you're making suggestions. Medium was like you're changing a few things and making more suggestions, but like leaving it to the writer, the change. And then a heavy was like you are actually moving paragraphs around and shifting things and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But there's also this element of a developmental edit that I want you especially to talk about is really looking at story and looking at characters and all of that. So you can give us your definition of a developmental edit and all that is involved and where you land on that light, medium, heavy.
Yeah. So here's what I will say. If anybody's looking for a developmental edit, I would double check what that particular editor classifies. Because this is like line editing is pretty universally understood. Copy editing, same thing. I separate things into an editorial assessment and a developmental edit when I'm doing this kind of work. And so an editorial assessment for me is I'm going to read through this manuscript twice and I'm going to be looking for big picture items. So character, world, plot are usually the big ones. And then if there are any ones that are particular to that manuscript, and then you'll get a letter from me at the end of that process. You won't get the manuscript back with anything in it. It's just a letter with like really detailed notes about what I'm observing. And I think this kind of getting into this kind of edit and developmental edit as well, I think this is where it comes down to different editor styles and different editors' beliefs in what this process should be. My perspective is always that as a freelance editor, I'm an advocate for the reader. I'm going to point out where you maybe are leaning in a direction, but not fully, or where you're doing 2 or 3 different things that aren't really lining up. And you need to make some decisions. And so a lot of times in my letters, it's like, you have some decisions to make. And those decisions are going to motivate other decisions. I don't go in a prescriptive way, personally. I don't go in a way that's, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And again, it's going back to the first thing I was saying about the exchange of money. I'm not paying you. You're paying me. So I'm not publishing your work. If I go in and say, change this and do this, and you do this and you do this, you could bring that to an agent and be like, what is this? Or bring it to an editor down the line and they're like, they want you to undo everything that you just did. So for me, I come from more for the perspective of I'm going to advocate for the reader. I'm going to find out what your vision is. And I'm going to try to read the manuscript with those things in mind and help say, okay, you're doing this, but not fully. So we need to make a decision here. You can either decide to do this. And if you decide to do this, maybe you do these things. If you decide to do this, maybe you do these things and leave that up to the writer. So a developmental edit is the same thing, only I put comments throughout the manuscript. I'm still usually focused on big picture items with that, but I might get a little bit more micro. But I find that most of the time when people are coming to me for a developmental edit or an editorial assessment, they maybe haven't had an edit before. So that's also why I put focus on big picture items, because usually those are the things that need to be addressed before we can address these secondary items in the manuscript.
Yeah. And there's nothing more discouraging as a writer than getting feedback from an editor that says, you should do this, and it doesn't match your vision.
Yes.
It is so key to have someone that understands what you're trying to do and can help you get to the point where you are executing what you want.
I'm a big fan of the Liz Lerman critical response process. Do you know it?
I do. I just read a lot of books on it.
Oh, it's so good. It is my go-to whenever I'm teaching a class. And I've now started to take it into account as it relates to the feedback I'm providing. And I always send out like a survey in advance. And I'm like, what are you thinking about for this manuscript? Which I think also from a writer perspective, every writer should be doing when they're trying to get feedback, because you spend so much time by yourself with your story. So much time. You need to be able to look at it from a critical angle. And that practice of what is it that I don't think is working about this? And then bringing that to a person, then they can be able to say, oh, okay, I see what you're saying here. I always ask like if there's any particular inspiration or basically heart piece to this that you want to make sure you preserve as well. And I look for how to pull that out, maybe even more, that kind of thing too. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a crucial part of the process.
So I have a number of friends who've gotten edits, and the risk of getting an editor that doesn't work for you is like so high.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping you can help us. How do you find a freelance editor? How do you find one that's a good fit for you and your novel? Like, how do you, there's going to be risk inherent in it anyway, but like, how can you make the best possible choice about it?
Yeah. So I think that there's a gut feeling that has to go along with this, right? And I think if you can find out an editor's perspective on editing, whether it's through their website or wherever they're listed as part of editing, I think that can be really helpful to just understand what it is that they see as their job as an editor. I do think every editor that I've known has had a different process for how they go about helping people make that decision. Personally, I have them send me 5 pages, and then depending on the kind of edit they're looking for, I might offer to do, if they're looking for like a line edit, I might be like, I'll send you how I would line edit this section, basically. Mm-hmm. So you can see like what I'm trying to do. But I always have a meeting with the person. And one of the first things I say to them is, this is like dating. Like I would encourage you to talk to other people. Like I would encourage you to keep your mind open to other people. Like I might not interpret your work the way that you want your work interpreted. And you should find an editor who does. And so I offer that. I do 20-minute consultations, maybe a little bit longer, every time somebody wants an edit. Because I'm like, you're about to make a big decision here. I want you to feel comfortable going into that decision. And for me, that involves me saying, here's how I'm seeing your work. Here's the things I'm seeing missing in those first 5 pages. I often will have them send me an outline too, if they have it, and I can come back and say, what I'm seeing in your outline is that you have a sagging middle that's happening here, that you need something that's pulling it up or whatever it is. And I give them that perspective. And then I don't talk money. I don't talk any of that on that consultation call. That is strictly to see, do I think I'm a good fit for you? And do you think you're a good fit for me? And then I will send like a proposal to them with all of the like nitty gritty details and stuff. Because what I've found is that like, it doesn't make sense to talk about money in that moment. Like what we need to understand first is if this working relationship is even something. And I have had calls where in the middle of the call, the person will be like, you know what? I don't think this is going to work. And I'm like, no, I don't think it's, I really wish you the best. And I think that's good, because I think that there are so many editors out there. So there's plenty of people for you to go find your right person. Now, where to go? So there's a couple of different places. So there's places like Readsy that has a lot of really amazing editors on it. I feel I have enough work, so I'm personally not on Readsy. but I know people who are fantastic. And you have to have been involved in projects that have been published in order to be on Reedsy. Mm-hmm. Then you have places like the Editorial Freelancers Association. I prefer that as a place to go, if nothing else, to look up current rates, because Reedsy finds a median when they list what their rates are. They're like, it's anywhere from this to this, whereas the Editorial Freelancers Association has, I think, what is more actually current to what freelancers use. But that's also a place that I think people can post that they are editors through there as well. And then there's smaller boutique places like Angela Editorial, which is the collective I'm a part of. And a lot of people with them do Kidlit. So I know this podcast is specifically focused on Kidlit. So a lot of us work with Kidlit over there. There's a lot of former BCFA people over there. But then there's also things like if you take a writing class, a lot of writing teachers also will do, at the very least, manuscript reads, manuscript consultations. So if you find a teacher you really like, I think it's worth reaching out to them and saying, hey, do you do this? Or do you know anyone who does? Because I think a referral is one of the best ways that you can do this kind of work to find the right person. If you know somebody who's got an edit and they really liked that person, getting a referral.
I wanted to go back to you'll do a line edit on 5 pages or something. And it's just to mention that it's not uncommon for editors to charge for that if you want a sample edit, because there have been some bad apples who have gone out and they get 10 pages of their manuscript line edited by 20 different people, and then they have a line edited document for free. So, so that's not a red flag. It's a thing that has become common in the industry. But there are some people that will do either a free consultation or a sample edit of a small portion of it.
Yeah.
When I've done work, I've asked people to send 5 pages from the beginning and 5 pages from somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Because often, especially when I'm estimating how much I'm going to charge, because usually people have done a lot of work on the first pages.
Yes, they have.
And then when they get in the middle, it is a little rougher. And so I can very much underestimate how much work it's going to be.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's another thing you might get asked of by an editor in the early stages.
And most of the time, if people ask for the review fee, I know people who do that. And the people I know who at least do that, they will take it off of whatever if you hire them. So it's not just money you're giving away in that sense.
Yeah. I didn't know that. That's good to know. That's a smart way to do it. I like it.
Yeah.
So if people are looking for editors, are there any red flags that they should watch for?
Well, I think this is a hard one to answer because I just know a lot of great.
I know, me too.
I'm like, what would be I saw that question. I'm like, I sat with it for a minute. I'm like, what would be a red flag? I personally come from an artistic background. So for me, anyone I'm going to get you published. Unless you're self-publishing, nobody can guarantee that. Even editors at publishing houses can't guarantee that they're going to actually be able to push your book through. That's not a realistic thing for somebody to say. I would say also be on the lookout for what I was just mentioning around the aspect of do this, do that, do this, do that. Because at the end of the day, it's your manuscript. I have had more than one person come to me for coaching or for freelance editing work who have just a manuscript that's so disjointed because they've just taken all of this advice that people told them they had to do. You don't have to do anything. It's creative writing. We're all hallucinating these stories in our head and putting them down on tree shavings. We don't need to do anything. I don't know. I read pretty broadly and I read books where I'm like, that was the weirdest thing, but it worked. And so there's no one right way to do this. So I always say if anybody's telling you this is the way you have to write a book, they're probably trying to sell you something. Because there is no one way to write a book. There's so many different approaches and so many different kinds of things getting published. So there are within certain genres, certain expectations. Romance is a big one. Mystery is a big one where structures and in romance, what trope are you using? Those sorts of things is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking more about I have the answer for you. I would say that would be a bit of a red flag. And then also look at the way that they are. I would say look at those rates on the Editorial Freelancers Association website, but also look at like how they're billing you. Are they like, give me all this money up front? That may or may not be a red flag. Like, I don't want to blanket statement that, I personally do a 50% up front and then a 50% once I'm done, just so that I have a little bit of like security there, but you also have a little bit of security there. That's my approach. So like I said, that might not be a red flag depending on the person and depending on what you're getting reviewed too. If you're getting like a picture book review, that's going to be a couple $100 and they might just be like, up front, let's do that. And then we'll do these passes. Whereas if you're sending me a 300-page novel up front, thousands of dollars, that's, wait a minute, hang on. Where's security in that? So those are the things that I could come up with for this question. Yeah.
Those are great answers. You will get a contract from an editor that you work with, and you should read it. And if you have questions, you should ask the editor about that. A lot of contracts that I've seen are written in response to bad experiences that editors have had. So there may be like weird little things in there that you're like, why is this? What should people think about in looking at the contract? Is there anything they should look for there?
Yeah. So a schedule of payment, the services that are going to be offered, being a little bit more explicit, the ways that you are going to pay the person, like what to expect with that. And then I think usually there's something in there around not holding liable anything in there. There's usually some sort of protection for the editor of this is not an endorsement. This is not, these edits are for your eyes only kind of thing. But then the big one, the thing that probably takes up the most room in mine is cancellation and what that looks like and what the fees are associated with canceling. And then this is something we didn't even discuss, but most developmental edits, line edits, editorial assessments, maybe copy edits. Since I don't do copy edits, I don't know. They're per word usually. So, when you have something smaller like a picture book, you might have a blanket hourly fee or something like, this is what this costs, this package costs. But usually when you're doing bigger edits, you're going to have a per word like amount that you have. So that fluctuates and is variable. So when you give me your estimate, if you add 20,000 words on the back end, I'm charging you for 20,000 more words. So like reading for those kinds of nuances and then how that works with cancellation, because it's not a flat fee, how that works in terms of where in the process, if you cancel, what the process of payment would be and expectation and that kind of thing.
And it's possible that you will find editors that do an hourly and provide a range of hourly. That's what I do just because that's how I came up and it's what works for me. But I will give an estimate that includes all of it. So you'll know the top and bottom range of that. And then I'll report in what the totals were and how much I'm charging. And that's more on the copy edit end. And I feel like too, I do a version of this with like a manuscript consultation where I'll do one read through, and then do a phone call. And that's like, you're not getting anything written from me. And something like that I'll do hourly. And I'll give you, based on your page count, an estimate of how many hours it will take and give a range so that it could be anywhere in here. Yeah. So I think it just depends on the kind of edit for sure. But in any contract, you should see cancellation information related to however they're billing you. For, it's per word or per hour. Yeah. And you'll also probably have a due date because editors are creating their calendars and setting aside time for your work and trying to move your date at the last minute. It's not cool. Don't do it. Keep those deadlines. But if you're struggling, talk to the editor.
Absolutely, because that's the other part. I think at the end of the day, most editors are writers themselves or have been writers at some point. They understand that the process is not always a straight line. It's not always as smooth as you think it's going to be. You think it's going to only take you. I do this all the time. I've stopped telling my agent when I'll have something to her. I'll tell her. And then I'm like, actually, I know I said 6 months. I need 8.
Yes.
So I think sometimes you have to give yourself, whenever I'm helping coach people on timelines and stuff, I think I can do this in a month. And I'm like, cool. So let's plan on 2 months. There's always going to be life that happens and things come up or you get sick or you need to go out of town for this random thing. Give yourself a little bit of extra time when you're budgeting that, I would say.
Build in the buffer time. Definitely. Definitely. But I also think our brains can only handle a certain amount of time. Mine is like 4 months. If it's going to take longer than 4 months, I am not going to want to do it. And so I always When I was writing my dissertation, I was 4 months away from finishing it for 2 years. But my brain needed to believe that. Like, that is how I was able to get through.
Hey, if that's what you need, that's what you need, right? Give yourself that thing.
And I think too that part of it is experience, right? Like, I've been editing for a really long time. When I was doing my hourly rates, I was learning what my pace was, et cetera.
Right.
And you've written enough and seen enough people working that if someone says this is going to take a month, you can say, sure.
Probably not.
Probably not. Like,
what I say is I'm like, it's your ambitious goal. It's like, you can do it. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. A month-long writing retreat, you can do a lot.
Let's do something a little more realistic too.
Yeah. Or leave yourself room for,
life.
At least leave yourself room for some life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. You'll reach out to an editor usually by email, or if you're going through Readsy, it will be through their ecosystem.
Yes.
And then you'll get information back from them, either setting up a consultation or more things to read about their process and what they do. And then you will get the money information and do you send the contract out at that point or not until they agree?
No. So my whole process is, if you contact me, I send back some initial questions and then ask for 5 pages and an outline, ideally. Once I get that back, we set up a meeting usually. I would say 90% of the time I meet with people rather than give actual written feedback. During that meeting, we discuss everything I mentioned before. After that, I send a proposal, and I usually give people a week to just review it, make some decisions. What I do in my proposals is I give a 6-month grace period. I'm like, I'll honor these rates for 6 months. But if you want to be on my book, you need to sign a contract. So if you're like, yes, let's do it, let's go, I'll send the contract. And until you have signed that, sent it back to me, I have to leave myself open to take other work. And for that, I usually, again, give people like a week or 2 to get it back to me. But for me, as you said, I usually need that contract in order to say, okay, I am blocked off for this time to work on your manuscript. I'm not taking anybody else. And so the contract comes then. And so that might be 4 months before we work together. That might be months in advance. A lot of editors book out a while in advance. Sometimes it's, I could get this done in this amount of time. It depends on the type of edit too. Certain edits take a lot longer than other edits. But if I want to have this thing in an editor's hands by this date, I would say reach out to them 3 to 4 months in advance of that, because they book out so far usually.
And then you sign the contract, pay a deposit.
Yeah,
you're off to the races.
Yeah, I do the deposit 2 weeks in advance so that things change, they change. So I get the deposit 2 weeks in advance, and then I'm like, send me your manuscript whenever you're ready, but by this date at the latest. And this is the big difference between coaching and editing for me. If I'm coaching you, we're maybe meeting every other week, every month. We're working things in pieces, craft elements in pieces. But with this, I'm like, I'll see you in 6 to 8 weeks. Essentially, go take a break, forget about this manuscript. It's going to make it easier to come back to later and have a critical eye. So unless I have a question that comes up, I rarely speak to somebody I'm working with in that time, which I think can be a little scary.
I have a friend who just had a manuscript come back early from an editor, and they were like waiting on tenterhooks the whole time.
Yeah. It can be a little some people love it. They're like, oh, thank God, I don't have to think about this for a while. But then some people, they do. And I have had people reach out and be like, I just want to check on the time. I'm like, yeah, we're totally good. I'll send it by end of date this day. You should expect this. I always try to give a little encouragement, because I know when somebody has your manuscript and you're waiting for like the heartbreak that's probably about to come, it can be a little daunting. So I try to be as encouraging as possible, because I know that pain.
Yeah. But they also, I feel like when I've had people read my work, that it's such a gift to be able to have someone see what I've done and to see the good in it.
Yeah.
I just recently had someone read 4 pages and I was like, oh, I forgot. I love this. Like, it's nice to get a little pat on the back sometimes.
Yeah.
Even if there are a ton of things to change, to be able to have see those positive things as well. Like, an editor's job isn't just to tell you what's wrong with it.
Oh, gosh, no, absolutely not. I am of the opinion, I believe there's gold in everything that we make.
Yeah.
Even this little poem that she wrote that was a haiku. There's gold in there. There's always gold to be found. And sometimes, and I actually, so what I do when I send my stuff to my agent, I send it to my husband and I'm like, I need to hear how I'm pretty and how I am brilliant and amazing, because I know I'm going to get feedback from her that is going to take me in all these different directions and make me question myself and have imposter syndrome. And I'm prepping myself for that by having someone that I love tell me how amazing I am. And we need that. We need that boost. But it's also super useful in knowing what not to get rid of. When I sent my manuscript out to a couple different people, everyone said, don't lose this. Whatever you do, don't lose this. And that was actually so useful in revisions, knowing, oh, there's some magic here that I haven't, it's not fully realized yet, that I need to develop and I need to expand on and I need to maybe make bigger. I think it's really useful. I think people they'll give it to me straight, break it down for me, tear it apart. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. No editor wants you to take away what's working. And sometimes if it's neutral, if you don't say anything about it, it might just disappear in the revision. And you want people to do more of what they are doing well.
Absolutely. And I think there's this other element too of like, sometimes as writers, we need to hear what we're good at, because it's an area where we don't have to work as hard. There's going to be so many places as writers where we have to work so hard and use so much of our brain, and it can be really taxing, that it's sometimes useful to know you nailed this technique or this part of the story, or you get structure, you get dialogue, whatever it is. I think it can be really useful because it's like, you can forget about that. That's going to come naturally to you. So focus over here on these things now. You don't have to work hard over here.
But it also gives you intention, not on this manuscript, but on a future manuscript. I realized very early, like, setting is really hard for me. Like, writing it is fine, but I will smush a city in all sorts of different ways. If it's a place I'm not familiar with, it like makes no logical sense and it's so hard to untie. And I was like, you know what? There are maps of everywhere I've been. Like, I can just pick a place and start there. And if I need to move a library, I can move a library, but it will be on a map. And like, I can figure out where it is. And so I was able to make choices about that, about something that was hard for me. To make the next draft easier. Like, I just don't have to think about it that hard anymore.
Absolutely.
So,
like,
and editors
hack for yourself.
Yeah. And editors are great at helping you figure out what those hacks are. They can be. Not everyone.
Hopefully.
So I want to go back to the consultation call or that email communication. Are there questions that you really like for people to ask? Or what questions do you think are helpful for authors to ask in those sessions?
Yeah, I think that it can be whatever's like on your mind, I think I would say go with your gut if there's something you're really concerned about. Let me think, authors to ask me. I think getting clarification on how I'm viewing your story and whatever questions come up depending on your manuscript because of that. I wrote a story once, when it was actually my graduating thesis in grad school, where it was almost an entire cast of women, almost like 90% of them were pregnant. So there was a hesitation I really had about working with men on that. And it's not to say that, and I ended up working with a male advisor on it. So it's not to say that the men couldn't have a perspective on it, but I wanted to be sure that any man that I worked with on it could come to it from a certain perspective and a certain angle, you know? So I think thinking about your particular manuscript, if there's anything in there that's really important for you that has implications larger for you as either a person or within the story or within your artistic vision, making sure that you're on the same page with that editor, I think is crucial. Because if that editor comes in and it's like, I don't know why all these pregnant people are here, that's going to be a problem. That's the whole point of the story. Or if they have a flippant attitude about that of, oh yeah, I get that. And I'm like, so I think that it's not to say that somebody can't be right for your work if they're not like aligned with you in all of the human ways that we align with each other. But it could be an important aspect for you to have somebody have eyes on it that does.
I like it. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the writer experience too, about how to anticipate different things, how you might feel while you're waiting for an edit. Are there things that writers can do to make the process less stressful for themselves and for you? Not necessarily in the waiting part, but in how they prepare for it, how they approach it, the mindset they have.
Yeah. So I think this is where that consultation or that intake element is really important. Listen to your gut. If this person doesn't feel right for you, go find somebody else. That I think can be huge in the feeling like I'm handing this over to somebody I trust and somebody who's going to take care of my work. So I think really taking the time to find somebody that you want to work with and who sees your manuscript for what it is and who is whatever kind of editor you need, because there's so many different kinds of approaches out there. I think that can go a long way to helping quell some of that anxiety and that fear about what you're going to get. And I think in terms of preparation for the manuscript, I think try to revise it yourself. Like actually try to do the work of revising it yourself, because then when you actually send it to an editor, you know you're in a position of, I need help. I legit need help on this. This is no longer me just wanting somebody to be like, you did the thing. Good job. That's important. But now you're actually like, okay, I tried to do this. It's still not working. I need help with this. Try to do some revising on your own. And it's okay if you don't totally know how to do that, but at the very least, read through the manuscript before sending it and see what you can do. See what you can figure out on your own. See if you're like, oh, you know what? I really wanted this character to be more part of the story and they drop off on page 50 and we never see them again. Okay, now I have to do some revision based on that. So I think that's one thing that people can do, because then when you send it off, you know you've done what you can do. And now you're putting into somebody else's hands to help you get it to the next level. And I think there's some release in that. I think Stephen King says he puts his manuscripts aside for 6 weeks or something like that. I could be remembering that wrong. But a part of that is so that you can come back to it with clear eyes, right? Mm-hmm. So I think also giving yourself, like setting yourself up to do some stuff you've been putting off because you've been working on this manuscript, right? I am going to go to the gym every day, or I'm going to do this spa day I've been wanting to do for myself. Treat yourself to something nice during that time, but also give yourself a true break. Let yourself watch the trash TV all day on Saturday rather than writing. Give yourself the opportunity to do some things you maybe hadn't been doing to fill that time while you're waiting.
Yeah. And I think, too, I liked what you said about you may have months in between when you sign a contract and when you send in. And if you're doing revision in that time, committing to sending it to someone changes how you see your manuscript.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm in this like mini workshop thing and I had to send in one page and I was like, I'll just grab a page from this. And I read it and I was like, I can't send this. I can't fix this in the 10 minutes I have right now. Not even look at the shape of the paragraphs. What is happening here? And so I did manage to find like a short story that was cleaner, but it really changed. Like I just haven't had people looking at my work that much. And so I was like, oh, wait, like I can anticipate what they're going to say. And I don't want to hear that.
Exactly. Yes. Get the work done yourself that you can get done. There's no point in having somebody tell you something you already know.
Right.
And that is another thing. That is another aspect that you can do, though. If you are wanting to send your work to an editor, you can say, and I did this, they were more readers than editors, but I sent it off to some people before I sent it to my agent. And I was like, look, I know this and this is not working. I still have to figure some stuff out on that. So can you read for X, Y, and Z? So being really explicit and letting people know, especially in that situation, I don't really know what to do about this. Mm-hmm. That's fine. I think it's when you know what to do and you haven't done it. I think everyone in this industry is in a rush, which I find so interesting because this industry it just moves at a snail's pace. It moves so slow. So it's this weird juxtaposition of everyone's hurry up. And then you get there and it's, I am a turtle.
Right.
So slowly. So give yourself some breathing room. Give yourself some space to actually take the time to do a pass, at least one pass for yourself before you send it.
Yeah. And I would recommend it after you've hired the person because
Oh, yeah.
you're going to see it differently. Even if you're like, I'm planning to send it to an editor, once you sign the paper, it's different.
It is. And that consultation could bring things up. I've had people who have come to me and I followed up with them and they're like, you know what? That consultation, like, I realized I don't know this and this about my story. I don't want to send it to an editor yet. I'm like, okay, great.
Yeah. Keep me in mind later. I just solved some of your problems.
6 months, you got this. Great. Let me know. Right.
Yeah.
So I've had people who have put a pin in getting me to review their whole manuscript because I've pointed some stuff out and they're like, this is making me rethink everything around this character or the setting or whatever it is.
Yeah. I get the sense that you love talking to people about their stories and you love reading all of this.
I do.
So I was going to ask you, what do you love about editing a client's work? But it sounds like a lot of things about it.
Here's the thing. My background is in the arts. Prior to my writing life, I was an actor and I've done every kind of performing art and worked in arts education and outreach and advocacy for so long and I have a really deep held belief that the arts are like critical for our souls and our humanity and who we are. I actually just picked up a book called Art Cure. It's over here on my shelf. The science of how the arts save lives or something. I'm not sure if that might be a bold statement, but I do think that, and I have seen that arts are transformative. So for me, I feel so lucky to get to be a little piece in that larger puzzle of an artist sort of building their work. And with my background in acting, one of my favorite things to do was table reads. I loved doing table reads. Everybody just sits around and they're like, what's going on here? Let's dig into this. What does this mean? And that's basically what I get to do in my work is just analyze text. And I love analyzing text. It's super fun. So I do really love what I get to do. And I love getting to help writers get to the next level in their work. And I think it's because I made a mission statement for myself a very long time ago, what I wanted my career span to look like. And it was that there's a lot of details to it, but the long and the short of it is I want to make really cool art and I want to help other people make really cool art. And it's helped guide decisions that I've made throughout my career prior to writing and since I started writing. So for me, I think I love the arts as a whole. I love engaging with art, and I believe it is a transformative experience, even if you never get your work out in book form, even if you spend your time with indie presses and it never gets this international follow. Even if you never publish anything at all, just the act of sitting down and doing that work is fulfilling. And I have watched it change people. And so I love what I get to do because I feel very fortunate and lucky that I get to be a little piece of that story for that person.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love it. Thanks. Thanks so much for joining me and letting all of our listeners know about the process of editing. I think it can be really mysterious.
It's a little daunting. Yeah.
And can be such a gift to writers at the right time.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
Thanks for listening. You can help other people find this podcast by giving us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or by sending a link to your writing friends. If you want to support this podcast, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/kidlitcraft. You can find us on social media at kidlitcraft, and you can find loads of resources and craft articles at kidlitcraft.com, where you can also sign up for our monthly-ish newsletter. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.